In this lesson I want to look at the Chinese room argument against artificial intelligence. Okay, this is against the idea of strong artificial intelligence. And in this lesson we're going to introduce the argument, we're going to have a look at the argument against strong AI, and then we'll have a look at the thought experiment that goes with the argument, the Chinese room thought experiment. So as an introduction, John Searle, who is the philosopher who developed this, he also was the one who distinguished between strong and weak AI. So he was the one who argued that there is a difference between strong AI and weak AI. And let's have a look again at what Searle says about strong and weak AI. So strong AI is the quote from him: "An appropriately programmed computer really is a mind, in the sense that computers, given the right programs, can literally be said to understand." That's what Searle said in 1980. So quite modern philosophy on this. When it comes to weak AI, computers are just able to help us to model and simulate minds. They're not actually minds in themselves. So that's the distinction. And what Searle is doing in this argument that we're going to look at in a minute is he's arguing against strong artificial intelligence. So he argues against the existence of strong AI, and he uses the philosophical argument along with a thought experiment to explain this. We're going to first have a look at the thought experiment before we turn to the actual official formal argument in question. It's called the Chinese room thought experiment. So let's start by just making a number of points, and then we're just going to explain how the argument and the thought experiment works. John Searle does not understand Chinese. That should be, we should first note that that is the case. So if we were to imagine locking him in a room and putting a slot in the wall, and then every now and then a Chinese speaker puts a message in Chinese through the slot in an attempt to get a reply from whatever's in the room, okay, and all that's in the room with John Searle is a box of Chinese characters and a big instruction book which is in English, and the instructions tell him what characters to respond with when certain characters are passed through the slot. So for example, if we take this little image here, so they pass this message in Chinese through the slot. John Searle, who's sat there, reads this message. He looks at the instruction book to show him what characters we use to respond to this message. He puts those characters together and he pushes it back out through the slot, and the Chinese people read the response. Okay, now let's suppose he gets this flawlessly. He gets it done flawlessly. Let's say he's really good at reading instructions, and he's really good at manipulating characters. If he does, the people communicating with him will have no choice but to say that he understands Chinese, that whatever is in this room is an intelligent speaker that understands Chinese. So it passes this kind of Chinese version of the Turing test. It passes this test to determine whether or not the person in there is an intelligent Chinese speaker. Okay. So what's really happening here? Searle, all he's doing is manipulating the characters by following an English rulebook. We wouldn't say that he actually understands Chinese just because he can see the characters, he can use a book that, the rules for the book, and he can pick out the characters that would yield a response. So he's passed the Turing test without actually being able to understand Chinese. So really we've got a problem. This is also another issue with the Turing test. Okay, and Searle says that if we replace him with the idea of a CPU in a computer, the same problem occurs. So this is the argument against strong AI. So the first premise is that if strong AI is true, then there is a program for Chinese such that any system running that program will be able to understand Chinese. Understand is the key word. Understand Chinese. John Searle could run the program for Chinese without actually understanding Chinese. He could do this thought experiment. He could sit in a room, and the program being him moving and using the rule books, the instruction books that is in English. He can do that without actually understanding Chinese. So therefore, strong AI is false. So we see what we've got here. We've got two premises and we've got the conclusion here. So it's really asking, if strong AI is true, then it has to understand Chinese. Well, the second premise is, well, John Searle can do it without understanding Chinese. Therefore, strong AI cannot be true. So it is false. That is the logical form of the argument. And we can have a look at it a little bit deeper by having a look at what Searle said was the distinction between syntax and semantics. So syntax and semantics. So Searle says that computers can never truly possess strong AI because they're only what he called syntactical. They only operate under syntax. And by syntax he just means the sort of rules for manipulating the symbols. A bit like how he did it in this Chinese room thought experiment. He had a rule book which would be seen as the syntax, and he just followed the rules to manipulate symbols. A bit like grammar in real language. Whereas semantics is a little bit deeper. It's a stronger definition. You can understand and you can do the syntactical understanding of words, but you also understand the meaning behind the symbols and the meaning behind the words themselves. And computers lack the ability to see a symbol and understand its semantics. It can only understand its syntax and what to do with it. Okay, so it can only really simulate strong AI. And therefore it can only ever be weak artificial intelligence. It can never be said to truly understand and truly possess strong artificial intelligence. And that is the argument that is made by John Searle. So there's a discussion task to do. You have to go on the internet and have a look at this under this sort of overview of the Chinese room experiment. Okay, so I want you to first watch this video here, which is a video narrated by David Mitchell. Quite odd, I understand, but you know, a comedian just narrating a philosophical thought experiment. And I also want you to have a look and think about, is there any ways we can critique this? Are there any immediate flaws with John Searle's argument, or do you think that it is a sound argument that proves and completely disproves artificial intelligence completely, and that we should stop talking about it? Those are the two things that I want you to look at before the next lesson, which is really what is wrong with the Chinese room argument.